If you feel like your brain is always scanning for the next thing, the next message, the next task, the next thing you might be forgetting, that is not just stress. Your brain might actually be stuck in a state called high beta, which is the brain's threat scanning mode. And when your nervous system gets stuck there, something really interesting happens. Everything starts to feel urgent, even the things that aren't. Today, I want to show you why this happens, why it's especially common for women, and one simple reset that helps your brain finally come out of that constant pressure state. All right, we are living in a time of constant information, constant bombardment if we're not careful, text messages coming in, email boxes being overloaded, pings, notifications from every direction, school WhatsApp groups, school emails, work emails, like you name it. I don't need to keep explaining it, but it is overwhelming. And from a nervous system state, our body doesn't know the difference between being stressed about our inbox being full and running from a tiger. And so although none of these daily inputs for the most part are threats to our survival, they can feel like it. And a lot of people think that means there's something wrong with them. I want to explain two things. One, feeling a constant state of urgency for tasks and things that aren't necessarily super urgent is not a personality flaw. It's a physiological state, and we can adjust that. Second, our body and physiology feeling this way, feeling stressed, having high cortisol, having maybe some underlying anxiousness, chronic inflammation, not sleeping is actually a feature, not a flaw. I know that sounds crazy, but here's what I mean. Our bodies are incredible, and our body's job is to take signals and respond and react and do what they're supposed to do to keep this machine running. And so the environment that many of us are living in with the constant bombardment, like it's our body's job to react accordingly. And so many times what we're trying to do is fix us, like something is wrong with us, but there's not something wrong with us. What we actually need to work on is adjusting our internal environment to help it understand that email, text, Slacks, WhatsApp, all these notifications is not a threat to us. And we need to empower ourselves with the ability to downshift and regulate and respond accordingly. Okay, so let's paint a picture of what this looks like over time. So I don't know how this shows up for you or in your house, but for me, when I'm like being bombarded with this stuff, if I'm not in check, all of a sudden, like everything is a rush. Everything is urgent and important, whether that means I'm at the checkout line at the grocery store and it's taking too long, or everybody here in Miami that's driving and you don't hit the gas as soon as the light turns green and they're like honking at you like crazy. All I think about when I hear that is these people are stuck in urgency, and no wonder. Like, how could we not? And so what we need to start to work on is creating boundaries, especially for women, boundaries around these notifications and creating barriers around our nervous system and edges around our lifestyle to make sure that our work chunk and work day has a beginning and an end. Because although these like text messages, WhatsApp groups, and all those things aren't always part of like our work day, especially for us mamas, we need to start to think about them as such. Because if you followed me for any time, you know that anything on our screens keeps us in our beta brainwave mode. Beta brainwave is our work task mode. It is our brainwave where everything will feel urgent and important. And so if we're working on, answering text messages and emails outside of our work hours, which God only knows what those are for anyone anymore, we are working all day. We are keeping our brain in a survival state without recognizing it, and then wondering why we feel like we have high cortisol, why we have autoimmune conditions, why we have inflammation, why we can't ever sleep well. Right? But this is it. It's creating boundaries around this. So one of the things I want to just explain lightly here is stress is healthy. Stress is important. Stress is a part of who we are as living beings. And without stress, we would actually be sick. So here's an interesting example. There have been environments created where trees were growing without wind, without stress, without interference. And these trees actually died. We need tenacity. We need hormesis. We need stress. All of those words basically mean stress. There's two kinds of stress: eustress, EU stress, and distress. And so everything I've talked about in this episode so far is eustress. This is stress that is healthy stress. It means you have a job, you have a family, you have responsibilities. Distress is a whole other topic, but all of the tools that I teach you are so that we can adapt to our daily healthy stresses. And the more we flex this muscle, the more we grow our capacity so that when we're hit with distress, which is actually really, really stressful, the 2 a.m. phone call that nobody wants to get, that something horrible happened, or a heavy diagnosis in a loved one or a family member, right? Or like a car accident, that we can handle that better because we have built the capacity through working with our daily stress. What I want you guys to do is to create boundaries around these notifications and the way that we respond and react to them. I want you to create closing signals around the edges of your busy, busy brain. What I mean by that is I want you to create a beginning and an end to your day, and I want you to create digital boundaries in reacting and responding to these notifications, whether it's in your morning, in your evening, or throughout your busy day. What I want you to create is opportunities for space, integration, and downshifting, and getting out of beta and into alpha and theta. And I talk about this a lot in my platform because it's one of the most powerful ways that you can regulate your nervous system. And everyone's talking about regulating your nervous system, but I don't think a lot of people are actually talking about how you do that in the micro moments, right? So this isn't requiring like a 1-hour breathwork session. This is making the decision that once you finish one of your major tasks in work, whether it's an email or a project or whatever, that when you have that 2-minute space, you're not then getting on your phone and answering all your notifications in an instant. You're first taking a moment to get into alpha and theta. And what I mean by that, for anyone who perhaps, if this is the first episode you've ever watched of mine, is doing something that feels good to you and making sure you're off your screen. And so again, this doesn't have to take like 60 minutes. This can literally be a 2-minute walk in nature. This can be putting on a song that you love and dancing around. This can be literally just like daydreaming. That daydreaming is one of the most underrated self-care tools there ever is. It gets us into theta, it closes our tabs, it allows you to integrate the information. Learning and growth and intellect doesn't come only from information. It comes from creating space to integrate. Think about it. If we're constantly bombarded by information, notifications, all the things, and we don't create space to take that in and figure out what it means to us, if we're just listening to podcast after podcast, filling every space, every moment with someone else's voice, and we don't take that moment, a few moments, to be like, okay, and how am I going to use that in my life? Then we're wasting all of that knowledge and information. And at a time when we are living in the age of knowledge and information, the most powerful, rebellious thing that you can do is create space for integration. That is the most important thing. And, you know, when I talk about boundaries around text messages and notifications with the women that I work with, it is one of the most uncomfortable things for them to work on. And this is not a flaw. It is a feature of who we are as women by design. And what I mean by that is boundaries are one of the hardest things for women because we are designed to be communal beings. And so when I'm telling a woman to let that text message wait, or, you know, let's go even a step further to at the end of her busy day when all she wants to do is relax and unwind and maybe go for a walk and be alone, connect with herself, but a friend needs her or there's a social event she's supposed to go to, and I'm encouraging her to start to say no when she means no instead of yes because she feels like she's supposed to say yes. It is one of the hardest things because as women back in the day, losing your village, losing your community, losing your friendships meant isolation. And back then, that could literally mean life and death. And so our nervous system, our hardwiring, our physiology that tells us this is really uncomfortable when we're doing something is going to remind us of that old story. It's going to constantly be reminding us that we need community. But what I want to tell you is that when you create community in yourself, by creating these boundaries, giving yourself space for alpha, giving yourself space for theta, allowing time to downshift, letting the text message wait, maybe ducking out on the social engagement that you think you're supposed to or have to do, is going to be one of the most impactful things you can do in growing your village and growing your community. I will promise you that if you feel it's time to get up and walk away from the table that you've been sitting at because it doesn't serve you anymore, or that you no longer feel called to showing up for that one woman who's just sucking the energy out of you or mad at you every time that you say you need to say no this time and take a moment for yourself, I can promise you your community will change and that it might get a little bit uncomfortable. But what that will look like on the other side of that is a community and village coming around you that actually matches who you're here to be, that sees your boundaries and respects them, that cheers you on when you say no, when you want to say no, instead of saying yes because you feel like you should. In the age of knowledge knowledge, information, constant bombardment from emails, text messages, notifications. You guys, we have to create space for integration. We have to create boundaries. We have to create these gaps for our brain, our physiology, and our souls to get the break that we need. This is everything that I talk about in my book, The Connection Code, because we have been sold a system that is constantly telling us to look outside of us to feel better for the next protocol, the biggest piece of information. I'm telling you guys, it's in here and it's through stuff like this. And I'm not saying it's always easy, but this is the nervous system work that actually gets you back to who you are and who you came here to be. And as a 44-year-old woman who has lived it and doing it every day, it is so much more free. It is so much more fun. It is so much more light and healthy on this side. If this message is resonating with you, I would love for you to click the top link in the description. I filmed a bonus little mini workshop for you. It's called the Urgency Reset. And this is all about teaching you how to take advantage of these micro moments, how to downshift into alpha and theta, little teasers on this boundary work and self-agreements, as I like to call them. And I would love for you to check that out. The problem isn't that life has gotten too big and too busy. It's that our brains have not stopped living in urgency mode. When small boundaries and self-agreements are introduced, it finally tells our brain that it's safe. And when urgency drops and our nervous system feels safe, connection rises. I'll see you next time.